Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started. Today, we're tackling what a lot of people in the industry would say is the single biggest bottleneck in commercial aviation.
Oh, absolutely.
Normalizing beyond visual line of sight operations. BVLOS.
Right.
If we ever want to see drones delivering packages or doing automated inspections or helping out in large-scale emergencies, BVLOS isn't just a nice to have.
No, it's completely mandatory. It's really the thing that makes or breaks the whole business case for the entire drone industry.
And today we have a really powerful stack of sources to get into.
We do. We've got proposed FAA rules, deep technical dives on things like sensor fusion, and some really specific blueprints for how these operations actually work.
And they all point to this huge paradigm shift that's coming.
A necessary one.
And the regulatory anchor for all of this, it's not some far-off theory anymore.
No, not at all. We're talking about the proposed FAA Part 108 rule.
The NPRM, right. The normalizing UAS BVLOS operations.
That's the one. Published back in August 2025, and it's being pushed hard by an executive order to get it finalized by early 2026.
Which means this is a huge immediate shift for the entire industry.
And what's really crucial for you to understand here is that the FAA isn't just tweaking the old rules. They're not looking for a slow adaptation.
They're building something new from the ground up.
Exactly. They're building a completely new regulatory foundation because they know the old way just cannot support the future scale of this technology.
Which brings us really to the core mission of this deep dive. We need to just completely destroy this dangerous myth that's been floating around the industry for years.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
The idea that BVLOS is just farther VLOS.
Right. It's so much more than that.
We want to show you in detail why BVLOS is this fundamental shift from safety that's assured by a human eye to safety that's assured by a quantifiable, certified system of systems.
It's an engineering approach. The moment you take the human eyeball out of the equation, you are removing the primary immediate safety sensor that we've relied on for decades in aviation law.
So you have to replace it.
You have to replace it. And you have to replace it with technology and with procedures that are demonstrably equal to or even better than a human. And that demonstration, it has to be quantifiable to a regulator.
And that right there is the essence of Part 108.
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, so let's unpack that shift. I think the best place to start is with what we all know, or think we know. Visual line of sight, VLOS.
Right.
Most people hear VLOS and they think of a distance, maybe 1,500 feet, a quarter mile, something like that.
That's a common misconception. It's a functional limit, maybe, but it's not the legal definition.
Okay, so what is?
The law, specifically Section 107.31, is focused purely on capability. It defines what the flight crew, so that's the remote pilot or a visual observer, what they must be able to do with their own eyes.
And if you can't do those things,
then you are legally BVLOS. It doesn't matter if you're 100 feet away or a mile away.
So let's get into those 4 non-negotiable tasks, because this is really the foundation of how we think about air safety right now.
Okay, first, you have to clearly know the drone's location at all times. Seems simple, right?
Seems simple.
But if you lose it for just a second behind a tree or a building, you've technically broken the rule.
Okay. What's number 2?
Second, you have to be able to visually determine its attitude, its altitude, and its direction of flight. And this is a really common failure point.
How so?
Well, think about it. If your drone is way up high against a hazy gray sky, you might see it as a dot.
Right, just a little speck.
But you often can't tell if it's flying toward you or away from you or banking or just hovering. You can't determine its vector.
And that leads directly into the 3rd task, which feels like the most critical one for avoiding collisions.
It is. The 3rd task is that you must be able to observe the surrounding airspace for other traffic and other hazards.
And it's not just seeing them.
No, and this is the key part. You have to be able to determine their proximity and their intent. You have to see that Cessna crossing your path, judge its trajectory, and decide if it's a threat.
And last one?
Number 4 is you have to be able to ensure you're not endangering people or property on the ground below you.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, and I think this is the aha moment for anyone listening.
Mm-hmm.
If you're out there flying and that drone becomes what you just called a token dot in the distance,
Yes.
you might know generally where it is, but you've pretty much failed tasks 2 and 3.
Functionally, you have.
Yeah.
You can't determine its vector, and you absolutely cannot reliably spot a non-cooperative aircraft, like a small plane or a glider.
That is the conceptual tripwire.
It is. The second you have to rely on your first-person video feed, your FPV, to maintain awareness of what's going on. In spirit, you are operating BVLOS.
Even though the regulations see FPV as just a supplemental tool?
It is. It's not a primary safety mechanism. If the sun is in your eyes, or you can only see this vague speck against the horizon, your ability to provide that true see and avoid assurance, that human safety loop, it's gone.
Which is why we've needed waivers for so long and why we now need something like Part 108.
Exactly.
So VLOS is totally confined by what the human eye and brain can do. Before Part 108, how did operators try to stretch that capability? Which brings us to EVLOS.
Right, extended visual line of sight. EVLOS is, it's a really clever approach, but it's ultimately a temporary fix. It's a human bridge.
A human bridge, I like that.
It acknowledges the limits of a single pilot's eyesight, and it solves the problem by distributing the safety function. It uses trained visual observers, or VOs, positioned along the flight route.
So the drone can fly out of the pilot's direct line of sight.
But it must always be within the unaided visual sight of at least one of those designated VOs.
So EVLOS is basically stretching the eyeballs using more humans?
That's a perfect way to put it. The primary safety sensor is still the human eye. It's just distributed over a wider area. Each VO is responsible for those critical tasks, spotting traffic, checking the vector in their little sector, and they communicate any hazards back to the pilot over the radio.
And in the U.S., legally, EVLOS is still treated as VLOS.
Correct. Under Part 107.33, it's considered VLOS because the crew as a whole still has eyes on the aircraft.
But internationally, that's not always the case.
No. And that difference in perspective really hints at the true nature of the risk. If you look at the European framework, EASA's SORA methodology.
The specific operations risk assessment.
Right. SORA often treats EVLOS as having a higher air risk than true VLOS. Sometimes it's even seen as a limited form of BVLOS.
Why is that?
Because the pilot isn't the one looking. The system now relies on human communication and coordination, which introduces new layers of operational risk that you have to manage.
And that is the perfect transition to Part 108 BVLOS, which just throws the human eyeball out of the process entirely.
It does.
What's the fundamental contrast between that EVLOS human chain and the Part 108 systems approach?
The contrast is systemic. A Part 108 BVLOS operation is built on the absolute certainty that no one is required to physically see the aircraft. The pilot, who we now might call a ROC manager, could be hundreds of miles away, just managing the system through telemetry and data feeds.
So if you take the eye out of the loop, the safety assurance has to come from somewhere else. It has to be automated.
And it has to be quantifiable. Separation from other aircraft, collision avoidance, ground safety, it all has to be managed by a certified system of systems.
Certified hardware, software, comms links.
All of it. Think of the train analogy we talked about.
Yeah.
EVLOS is like hiring human spotters along the track to look for problems.
Okay.
Part 108 is like building a fully automated digital rail line. You rely on signals, on digital switches, on a central control room, and on rigorous safety engineering to prevent collisions.
It's a complete shift from a procedural, human-centric way of thinking
To an automated, verified, technology-centric way of guaranteeing safety.
that distinction, human effort versus systems engineering, that's so critical. Let's make this tangible. Let's run through some specific scenarios to see the limits of the old way and what the new way promises.
Good idea.
We'll start with a classic industrial job. Scenario 1, inspecting a long rural pipeline corridor, say 12 kilometers long.
Okay. In scenario 1A, the old school VLOS version, you've got what we can call leapfrog and burnout.
Leapfrog and burnout.
Yeah. It's a flat area, Class G airspace, nothing complicated, but you still have to keep the drone within, say, 800 to 1,000 meters, so to cover that 12 kilometers.
You're driving your truck, flying a short segment, landing, packing up, driving another kilometer, and doing it all over again.
15 times, maybe more. The logistics alone are just crippling.
It sounds completely non-scalable.
It is. It takes a full day, you're burning fuel, you're putting wear and tear on your vehicle, and every single takeoff and landing is another point of risk. It's great for a proof of concept, but it's a terrible way to run a business.
You're maximizing your OPEX, your operational expenses.
Totally. Pilot time, vehicle costs, everything, for minimal output.
Okay, so next step up. Scenario 1B, the EVLOS version, the human chain. We're trying to do that same 12-kilometer inspection, but more efficiently with more people.
Right. So for 12 kilometers, you're probably looking at deploying 3 or 4 trained visual observers, plus your pilot.
And you space them out along the route.
You space them out to ensure you have overlapping visual coverage, maybe a couple kilometers apart. The drone flies from one VO sector into the next.
The risk here then shifts from logistics to coordination. What does good radio discipline even mean in this context?
It means that a VO has to be able to instantly spot a hazard, communicate it clearly and without ambiguity, and the pilot has to execute the right avoidance maneuver immediately.
And if there's any confusion, a garbled radio call.
That's a potential failure point. I mean, the big lesson with EVLOS is that it's just incredibly OPEX heavy. You're paying for 4 or 5 people, their travel, their equipment, all for one 12-kilometer flight. It stretches your range, but it multiplies your overhead.
Now let's contrast that with Scenario 1C, the Part 108 BVLOS version, the rail line in the sky.
This changes the entire game. The operation becomes fully automated. It's monitored from a central remote operation center, a ROC. The drone launches from a hardened dock. It flies the full 12 kilometers by itself, does the inspection, and lands at another dock at the other end.
So what's the safety trade-off? You've gotten rid of the VOs. What replaces them?
The replacement is a validated, certified system stack. You have an airworthy UAS, a DAA system, that's tuned for that low-density airspace, redundant C2 links, maybe over LTE or 5G.
And a really strict flight plan.
And an operational design domain, an ODD, that dictates exactly where it can fly, at what altitude, and where its emergency landing zones are. But here's the crucial part. Once you get that Part 108 certificate for this operation, scaling it from 12 kilometers to 50 kilometers.
Doesn't mean hiring 15 more people.
It means doing more engineering work. It's a CapEx problem, a capital expense, not an OpEx problem. And that transition from OpEx to CapEx, that is the economic tipping point for this entire industry.
That calculation is what will determine if these things become routine or stay as niche services.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move to Scenario 2. Patrolling a shielded power line, but this time it's near a town. So we're adding the complexity of terrain and infrastructure.
Right, a shorter line, maybe 5 kilometers, but it's running through that complex, low-altitude airspace near people, the distribution environment.
In the EVLOS version 2A, you're really relying on human judgment, the pull-by-pull leapfrog.
The pilot and the VO have to physically navigate that environment. The VO is constantly scanning for low-flying planes, for people on the ground, for cars on the road. They're actively using the tree line, the hills, and the power line itself as a physical shield against higher altitude air traffic.
So safety is localized. It's based on instant human reaction.
And high situational awareness of that immediate area. Yes.
Okay, now Scenario 2B, the Part 108 shielded ODD version. We take the VO away. How do you prove that's still safe?
This is a perfect example of engineering the safety case. Instead of a human just perceiving the shield, the ODD formally defines that shielded area as a highly constrained digital volume.
So you're talking about a digital box around the power line.
Exactly. Say 30 meters to the left and right of the line and strictly between 50 and 150 feet off the ground. The key to the safety case is proving, mathematically, that the probability of a typical small plane accidentally flying inside that specific corridor is statistically negligible because of the poles, the wires, and the surrounding terrain.
So the infrastructure isn't just a visual blocker anymore. It's a legally defined barrier in your collision probability model.
Precisely. And your safety then relies on 2 things. A validated DA system to handle local risks like other drones or big birds, and extremely precise hard-coded geofencing to make sure your drone never leaves that mathematically shielded zone.
You replace the human factor with numerical proof.
That's it. Proof of separation provided by terrain, altitude, and tight operational control.
Okay, let's tackle the biggest challenge. Scenario 3, urban logistics. A 4-kilometer medical delivery from a warehouse to a hospital rooftop. High traffic, high consequence.
Right. Scenario 3A, the illegal BVLOS version, is what happens when someone tries this with just FPV goggles.
They're flying by the video feed, looking at a map, and they think they're in control.
But that video feed only shows you what's directly in front of the drone. It absolutely cannot fulfill the task of scanning the complex urban airspace for traffic coming from above, below, or the sides.
Especially when you've got unpredictable traffic like air ambulances coming into that hospital.
That's the critical factor. The proximity to a helipad makes it mandatory for the pilot to be able to scan those approach corridors for helicopters. FTV fails that test catastrophically. It's a dangerous, unauthorized BVLOS operation.
Okay, so what about trying to do it legally with EVLOS? Scenario 3B, the rooftop relays.
This is a logistical nightmare. I mean, it's almost impossible. You need VOs on multiple rooftops, which means getting legal access, insurance clearances, security.
And they all have to have perfect line of sight and clear radio contact.
In a busy city with tons of RF interference and tall buildings, it's just the coordination is incredibly complex. And if you need to do 50 of these deliveries a day, the friction from that human chain model makes the whole thing economically unviable.
EVLOS just doesn't scale in a dense metro area.
Not for logistics, no.
Which brings us, finally, to 3C, the Part 108 BVLOS Metro Medical Corridor. What does that safety stack look like?
This would require the highest level of Part 108 certificate. The ODD is now a specific defined urban air lane, say from 200 to 300 feet above the ground. The drone has to be airworthiness accepted.
Meaning it's highly reliable, has redundancies, and fails in a predictable way.
Exactly. The DAA system has to be tuned specifically for that environment for helicopters.
Yeah.
And crucially, the ROC's procedures have to be formally integrated with the hospital's helipad operations and any local air traffic control or UTM system.
You're basically engineering a small automated airline route.
That's the perfect analogy.
So all of this really circles back to that critical economic takeaway. It's what defines who's going to win in this new Part 108 world.
The takeaway is this. EVLOS is a clever and necessary workaround for now, but it's incredibly labor-intensive. It's OpEx heavy. Your marginal cost per flight hour is always going to be high because you're paying for people.
Whereas Part 108 is a big upfront investment.
A huge upfront capital investment. It's CapEx heavy. You pay a lot for the engineering, for the certified tech, for the regulatory process, but once you have that certified system, your marginal cost per flight hour plummets.
It's an investment in automation and scale.
It's a complete shift in the entire cost structure of the business.
So now we have to get into the nuts and bolts of what actually replaces the human. This is the tech stack that enables that shift from OpEx to CapEx. And I think we have to start with the digital eyeball and brain. Detect and avoid, DAA.
Right. DAA is the technology that has to flawlessly perform that see and avoid task 24/7 in all the conditions you've defined in your ODD.
It has to see everything, assess the risk, and then act.
And execute resolution advisories, yes.
So what are the pieces that make up a successful DAA system? It's not just one thing, right?
No, it's a fusion system. It has to be, because no single sensor is perfect. You start with onboard sensors. You might have EO/IR cameras, electro-optical and infrared, which give you great detail up close for classifying things.
But they struggle in bad weather or from far away.
You do. So you add radar, usually small AES radars, which are great for long-range detection in any weather, but they might struggle to tell the difference between a small bird and a small drone.
So fusion is mandatory. One sensor's weakness is another's strength.
Exactly. Then you add in the cooperative data ADS-B signals from manned aircraft. You fuse all of that together, and then the next layer is the AI.
The computer vision.
Right. Systems that use deep learning to look at that camera data and identify if that moving dot is a low-risk bird, a medium-risk Cessna, or a high-risk helicopter.
And after all that seeing and identifying, we get to the decision engine, the go left now brain.
That's the collision avoidance logic. Often it's based on systems like AKS-X, which is the next generation of what airliners use. It processes all that fused data, the range, the speed, the altitude, and it calculates the fastest, safest maneuver to maintain separation.
It doesn't just send an alert to the pilot in the ROC.
No. Crucially, it generates a verifiable resolution advisory that the autopilot executes immediately. The big challenge, of course, is making all of that certified, multi-sensor, processor-heavy tech affordable and lightweight enough for a small drone.
Okay, so once you can see, you have to be able to control. Let's talk about the command and control link, the C2 link. If that fails, all that sophisticated DAA doesn't matter.
Right, because the drone is flying blind with no human in the loop to override it. Part 108 is going to demand proven C2 performance. We're talking guaranteed minimum availability, low latency, and verifiable integrity against interference.
This isn't your standard RC transmitter link anymore.
Not even close. The expectation is a multi-layered redundant system. Your primary link might be over commercial LTE or 5G, maybe with SIM cards for multiple carriers for diversity.
And a backup.
And a dedicated backup link. maybe a robust encrypted RF link, or even a satellite link for operations in really remote areas. The regulators are focused on 4 things: availability, latency, integrity, and diversity.
Diversity being key, using totally different methods to communicate.
Yes.
And the regulatory notice specifically calls out cybersecurity. This is where that term IUEI comes in.
Intentional unauthorized electronic interaction. It's the FAA's formal term for hacking, jamming, or spoofing.
So how do you mitigate that?
The NPRM mandates serious strategies. For the C2 link, it means strong encryption and mutual authentication, so the drone and the ground station know they're talking to each other and not an imposter. And it means active detection for jamming and spoofing.
Can you give us an example of how anti-spoofing works?
Sure, take GNSS spoofing, where someone tries to feed your drone fake GPS signals to make it think it's somewhere else.
Right.
A robust system will be constantly cross-checking that GPS data against other sensors, like its inertial measurement unit, its IMU. If the GPS suddenly says the drone jumped a mile to the left, but the IMU shows 0 acceleration,
The system knows something's wrong.
it flags the GPS as compromised and can default to another navigation mode or execute a fail-safe maneuver.
And that leads perfectly into the bigger regulatory idea here, airworthiness acceptance. You've called this the mini airliner mindset.
It really is the most profound cultural shift for the industry. For these critical BVLOS flights, the drone is no longer a consumer product. It's a certified piece of aviation equipment.
And Part 108 is moving away from the old FAA style of telling you exactly how to build something?
Yes, it's moving toward performance-based airworthiness. And that's largely driven by industry consensus standards from groups like ASTM and RTCA.
What does that mean in practice for a manufacturer? What do they have to prove now?
They have to prove quantified reliability. For example, they need to know and be able to prove the mean time between failure, the MTBF, for critical parts like motors and flight controllers.
And they need redundancy.
Redundancy is built in. Dual power paths, dual flight computers, dual GPS, and maybe most importantly, they need predictable failure behavior.
So if a motor fails, the system has a pre-planned, verifiable response.
Like a controlled glide to a safe spot or deploying a parachute with a known probability of success. The beauty of using these ASTM standards is it creates a faster, more modular path for companies to get their system certified.
Okay, so within that robust hardware, AI is obviously playing a huge role. But we need a really clean separation of duties here. What should the AI be doing, and what parts need to stay deterministic and auditable?
This is a critical safety architecture question. What AI is best at is perception and prediction.
The fuzzy stuff.
Exactly. It's great at classifying traffic from a camera feed, or predicting microweather, or spotting tiny changes in motor current for predictive maintenance. AI is an incredible decision support tool.
But the core safety logic, that has to be old-fashioned deterministic engineering.
Absolutely. That's what saves you when something unpredictable happens.
Yeah.
We're talking about hard-coded geofences the aircraft simply cannot cross. Or verified fail-safe logic like, if the battery hits 10%, you must land at this pre-approved spot.
You can't have a catastrophic failure because a machine learning model misclassified something.
Or had an automation surprise. Regulators are pushing hard for explainable AI, or XAI, so that if a system makes an autonomous choice, the reasoning is clear and can be audited after the fact.
So finally, how do all these individual smart drones fit together in the bigger airspace? That's where UTM comes in.
Right. UA is traffic management. It's the digital nervous system for the low-altitude airspace. And really, all BVLOS operations assume that a UTM system exists.
What key services does UTM provide? It's more than just a map.
Oh, yeah. It provides what's called 4D trajectory management. It handles strategic deconfliction, making sure 2 different companies don't plan to fly in the same spot at the same time.
Hours or days in advance.
Exactly. It also pushes out real-time information weather, temporary flight restrictions, new obstacles, and it does conformance monitoring, constantly checking if a drone is actually where it said it would be.
And we've seen this work in the real world.
We have. The FAA has authorized simultaneous multi-operator BVLOS flights in places like Dallas, relying entirely on a UTM system to digitally separate aircraft from zipline and wing. That requires deep API integration between the UTM, the company's ROC, and the drone's own DAA system.
Okay, moving from the tech itself to the math behind it. A core idea in Part 108 is moving away from a subjective feeling of it looks safe to an objectively measured, quantified level of risk.
Yes.
How do you actually define safety in measurable aviation terms?
We use an established concept called target levels of safety, or TLS. It's the acceptable probability of a catastrophic event, like a mid-air collision or a fatal accident, per flight hour.
And what's the benchmark for that?
For scheduled airline operations, the benchmark is often around 1 in 10 million, or $10 to $7 fatal accidents per flight hour. The goal with Part 108 is to prove that for your specific operation, in your specific ODD, the predicted risk is equal to or better than that benchmark.
So you're not just saying we're safe, you're saying we are 1 in 10 million safe. That is a massive burden of proof for a small drone company.
It is, and you need the data to back it up. If you can't quantify the risk, you can't make the safety case. And that quantification goes way beyond just other planes. It means managing unpredictable external risks, starting with a surprisingly serious one, birds.
Right. How do you build a safety case against nature when you're flying hundreds of miles BVLOS?
You have to approach it in layers: design, sense, avoid, and learn. Layer 1 is ODD design.
So just don't fly where the birds are.
Basically. Avoid known high-risk areas like rookeries or landfills. Avoid major migratory routes during peak season. You might even have time-of-day restrictions.
Okay, then layer 2, sensing. How do you spot a flock of small birds from a distance?
It's really complex. You need that sensor fusion again. Onboard cameras trained with AI can learn to classify flocks. But ground-based radar is also crucial here. Radar that's tuned specifically to detect non-metallic, non-cooperative things at low altitudes.
The goal is to see them far enough away to make a gentle course correction.
Exactly, a strategic avoidance, not a last-second tactical dodge, which is layer 3. Avoid. The system has to choose the safest behavior.
A soft avoidance versus a hard avoidance.
Right. Soft avoidance might be a small altitude change. Hard avoidance is an immediate aggressive turn. And the worst case scenario, if a collision is unavoidable, still has to be a controlled response.
A controlled descent or deploying a parachute.
The system has to prioritize the safety of people on the ground over the survival of the aircraft. Always.
Okay, so beyond nature, Part 108 also has to deal with 2 other big external threats: surprise weather and malicious humans. Vandals.
Yes.
Let's start with weather, especially those fast-moving micro-weather events.
Managing weather requires a really conservative approach. The ODD defines strict limits for wind, visibility, temperature. But to handle rapid changes, the ROC has to be integrated with sophisticated AI-based nowcasting systems.
So you're not relying on a 4-hour forecast. You're getting minute-by-minute updates.
Exactly. And the onboard sensors are also measuring inferred wind and turbulence, feeding real-time, localized data back into the system. If conditions exceed the ODD limits, the drone has to have a pre-planned automatic diversion to a safe landing zone.
Okay, now to the human threat. Vandals, interference, or even just accidental tampering with one of those automated docking stations.
You have to think about this across 3 threat surfaces. First is physical security at the dock itself.
So a locked box.
A locked, hardened enclosure with tamper sensors and remote video monitoring. Systems like the Percepto dock are designed around this idea.
The second surface is the digital security we talked about earlier.
Right, resilience against that IUEI. Continuous monitoring for GPS spoofing or radio jamming. And if the pilot's control is compromised, the drone has to have a policy-based autonomy that defaults to a known safe state.
And the third surface.
Accountability and deterrence. This is vital for public trust. Every BVLOS drone has to broadcast remote ID. Every flight has to generate a comprehensive data log, maybe even video evidence. If there's an interference event, that forensic data is essential for authorities to investigate and prosecute.
And all of this data, all this mitigation, it feeds into the big picture philosophy of safety, the Safety Management System, or SMS.
Right. Part 108 will mandate an SMS framework, which is the cornerstone of airline safety. It means continuous monitoring and rigorous flight data recording. We call it Drone FOQA, Flight Operations Quality Assurance.
So every flight, even a perfectly normal one, is treated as a data point.
It is. You're analyzing battery performance, link quality, DAA alerts, near misses, everything.
And what's the goal of Drone FOQA?
The goal is predictive safety. You're looking for patterns. If you notice that one specific corridor always has a bad radio link at kilometer marker 7, that data gets fed back to the engineers.
And they can fix it.
They can refine the ODD, or maybe relocate a ground repeater, or update the software. It's this continuous feedback loop that builds documented trust with the regulator over time.
So let's put this all in the context of the actual rules. Part 108, as it's proposed, creates 2 different tiers of authorization: permits and certificates.
Right, and this tiered approach is designed to match the regulatory burden to the actual risk and scale of the operation.
So permits are for the simpler stuff.
Exactly. They're intended for lower risk, localized, maybe temporary operations. Think about a one-off inspection of a remote substation or a short survey in a very low-density airspace. The approval path for a permit should be faster and require less exhaustive certification.
And the certificates are for the big, complex, high-stakes operations.
That's right. Certificates are for those urban logistics corridors, or for managing a whole fleet of drones from a single ROC, or for flying heavier, faster aircraft.
And because those are linked to critical infrastructure and flying over people, there's another layer.
There is. The NPRM anticipates a formal security overlay. That means the TSA gets involved, and operators will have to adhere to Part 146 security requirements, adding layers of vetting and procedural checks that go beyond just flight safety.
What's really fascinating here is how this American framework is lining up with what's happening internationally. You said that learning Part 108 makes you bilingual in global BVLOS.
It does, because all the major regulators are now speaking the same language of risk-based assessment. In Europe, ESA uses the SORA methodology.
The specific operations risk assessment.
Right. SORA forces an operator to quantify their ground risk, the chance of hitting someone, and their air risk, the chance of a collision. And that determines their required SAIL.
The specific assurance and integrity level. Can you explain SAIL real quick?
SAIL basically dictates how robust and redundant your system has to be. If you have a super high-risk operation, like flying over a crowded city near an airport, you'll need a very high SAIL, maybe SAIL 4.
Which means military-grade, heavily documented, nearly perfect hardware.
Exactly. But a very low-risk operation, like flying over a desert, might only require SAIL I, which allows for much simpler and cheaper systems. Part 108 uses that same risk-based language, ODD, ConOps, quantifiable mitigations, to arrive at the same place. The concepts are basically interchangeable.
This shift away from prescribing hardware to assessing performance and risk is just massive. Okay, so let's close the loop on the human. The pilot's been taken out of the cockpit, out of the field. Where does the human fit in this new automated world?
The human role shifts entirely. You're no longer a stick and rudder pilot. You are now a systems manager in a remote operations center, a ROC manager.
So you're supervising the automation.
You are. You're monitoring the health of the system, the Z2 link, the DAA feeds, the UTM conformance, and you're making high-level decisions, like telling an aircraft to divert because of unpredicted weather.
That sounds like a huge cognitive load, especially if you're managing multiple aircraft at once. What are regulators worried about when it comes to that one-to-many ratio?
That is the primary human factors concern: workload and alarm fatigue. They're still debating what a safe limit is. Maybe it starts at 1 pilot for every 3 drones in a complex operation, but that's still being worked out.
And alarm fatigue seems like a huge risk.
It's a critical failure point. If the interface is constantly throwing up benign alerts, the pilot might eventually ignore a critical one. So the interface design has to be incredibly smart about prioritizing only actionable high-risk warnings. It has to prevent things like mode confusion, where the pilot isn't sure which automated system is in control.
So future safety is really about applying classic airline procedures to this new digital environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The training for these ROC teams is going to be all about crew resource management, CRM, and threat and error management, TEM. It's about how the team communicates, how they cross-check data, and how they manage human error in this high-stress, data-rich environment. The solution isn't just the tech. It's the tech being managed by highly disciplined, airline-trained operators. #outro.
Well, this deep dive has really established a crucial truth. The era of BVLOS isn't defined by how far you can fly, but by how rigorously you can engineer your safety system.
Yeah, we've shown that VLOS and EVLOS, they depend on human effort. They depend on human presence. And that limits scale and drives up your operating costs.
Whereas Part 108 BVLOS demands a totally different mindset.
It's a systems mindset. Certified airworthiness, validated DAA, C2 redundancy, strict ODD discipline, UTM integration. BVLOS isn't a single gadget. It's a full, complex ecosystem that's designed for automated scale.
And for you, the learner trying to navigate this massive shift, the path forward seems pretty clear.
Stop thinking like an ambitious hobbyist who's just trying to push the range limits. You have to start thinking like a safety engineer. The barrier to entry is high, it's CapEx heavy, but the long-term rewards are enormous.
And smaller operators can still win.
They absolutely can, but they have to be smart. Focus on leveraging certified third-party services, certified DAA, certified UTM, certified components, instead of trying to build the entire safety case from scratch. Become an ODD ninja?
Fantastic. So for our final provocative thought for you to chew on, Let's look beyond the current rules.
Yep.
We've pretty much proven that the physical technology, the sensors, the links, the airframes, is capable of flying BVLOS. The regulatory framework is now catching up. So the next frontier, the real challenge, isn't about whether we can fly, it's about the trust layer in the automation. Specifically, can the industry standardize and rapidly certify the performance of the non-deterministic, AI-driven parts of the safety system?
The computer vision models, the predictive algorithms.
Right. Can we certify those things quickly enough to meet this huge global demand for predictable, auditable performance? That intersection of regulatory audit and evolving machine learning, that remains the single largest, most complex field for innovation that will truly unlock the mass BVLOS economy.
The future of flight really depends on certifying the digital brain, not just the wings.
Exactly. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.